The 2024 Formula One season, the second half at least, is one of the best that we have had in recent years. We had new drivers like Lando Norris and Oscar winning their first Grand Prix. We had 4 different constructors taking victories and even podiums for midfield teams. But most importantly, going into every single race weekend in the second half, there was a real sense of unpredictability, not knowing who's going to be the quickest. Some weekends it was Red Bull, some it was McLaren, some it was Ferrari, some it was Mercedes. So if 2025 is going to be anything like the back end of 2024, we are set for an absolute banger of a year. So let's take a quick look at everything we can come to expect from the 2025 Formula One season. Now there are so many storylines coming into this year. You've got Lewis going to Ferrari, which I still won't actually believe is really happening until I'm there for lights out at the GP. You've then got the downfall of Red Bull Racing and a new young teammate for Max Verstappen to take on. You've also got McLaren, who won the Constructors' Championship and are going to go into this year hoping to fight for both titles. And what about all the young rookies entering our sport? Is anyone going to get dropped? Jack Doohan, I'm looking at you. Are we going to see any new teammate rivalries form? I'm looking at you, AlphaTauri. You've got 2 very, very hot-headed drivers there. And then you've got the ever-growing tensions between Formula One and the FIA. If you're wondering why I am outside at the moment, I am currently on a road trip through Australia, heading down towards Melbourne for the GP. And I am living out of my car at the moment, so there's not very many places to film. So I've decided to come down to the beach to make today's video. This is the office for today, but let's start with Lewis. Combination of the most successful driver and the most successful team in the sport's history has all the ingredients to form something truly special. And with Ferrari having won 5 races last year and only 14 points behind McLaren for P2 in the Constructors last year, you've got to expect that they're going to be fighting at the sharp end this year. Since Fred Vasseur took over team principal at Ferrari, the team has been on a steady upward incline. And the signing of Lewis Hamilton was a real statement of intent from Fred Vasseur. Just think about it. Ferrari have now almost certainly got the best team on the grid. I can't think of another driver pairing that's as strong as Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. You know, the other top teams, you've got Red Bull, obviously have Max Verstappen, who certainly counts for a lot, but he's got a very young, inexperienced teammate, so that's not as strong. You've then got Mercedes with George Russell as a very good driver, but again, Kimi Antonelli's quite unproven. I think McLaren arguably have the second best pairing of Lando and Oscar, but I don't think anyone really comes close to Lewis and Charles. Hamilton's moving on from Mercedes has been somewhat bittersweet. Obviously, they shared the highest of highs, winning all those championships and races together. But since the start of the 2022 season, things just haven't gone their way. And Lewis Hamilton has been very outspoken that the car has not been developed the way he's wanted it. So of course, he decided to jump ship to Ferrari and join back with team principal from his GP2 days, Fred Vasseur at ART Grand Prix, in the hopes of claiming a record-breaking 8th Formula One World Championship. But Lewis does have a few obstacles in his way. First up, of course, is his teammate. Charles has proven himself to be one of the fastest drivers on the grid, if not the fastest driver over a single lap in qualifying. Charles has been Ferrari's golden boy since 2018 when he joined the Formula One grid and was quickly promoted in 2019 to Ferrari. So he's been waiting for a championship winning car himself, so he's not just going to roll over because Lewis Hamilton's joined the team. Plus, you could always argue that Lewis's best years are behind him. Now, I'm not saying that he's washed, not by a long shot. But I think in the last few years, we have seen maybe his consistency dropping off a bit. But we did see last year that he is still capable of delivering something very special given the opportunity. The win that he took at Silverstone was historic. But 2 out of the 3 years that Lewis and George were paired, George Russell did come out on top. And George and Charles are from a very similar generation. And then you've got the pressure that Ferrari drivers feel. The pressure that comes with being a Ferrari driver is like driving for no other team in the sport. You've got the whole country of Italy watching and demanding that you get the results that they want to see, as well as the millions of Ferrari fans across the world. Most Formula One fans are fans of a single driver or a couple of drivers and will sort of follow them to any team they go to. But at Ferrari, it's the team that comes first. The fans will love you in red, but they won't want to see you succeed in any other colour. But that being said, Lewis is one of the most experienced drivers we've ever seen in the sport, and he's been around the block long enough to know what he needs to do. So I don't think the pressure will get to him the same way it would with the younger driver. You've then got the papaya problem of McLaren. Having won the Constructors' Championship last year, albeit just by 14 points, they still did win, you would expect McLaren to be the top team coming into 2025. So if Lewis does hope to get that 8th title, he will have to conquer all of these obstacles. Speaking of McLaren, winning their first Constructors' Championship since 1999 was a huge achievement for both Lando and Oscar. So if we do expect that McLaren will be the top team next year, Are we going to see any friction between their drivers? We did see on a few occasions last year that there was some tension between the drivers, most notably at Hungary when Lando refused to slow down to let Oscar pass, but then he did eventually let him pass. But was that a bit of a marker to say, I'm a lot quicker than you, so I don't have to slow down, but I will slow down? And then you've got Oscar's move at Monza around the outside of Lando at turn 3, which Lando never saw coming. And I think that was Oscar's way of saying, I'm here to fight too. Lando finished the year in P2 with 374 points and taking 4 Grand Prix wins. Oscar finished down in P4 on 292 points with 2 wins to his name, which is quite a big points difference, but in the latter half of the year, the team did somewhat favour Lando. Definitely not as much as they should, but there were some occasions where they did give Lando preferable treatment. The big difference, however, came in qualifying. I was very surprised when I looked this up. Lando beat Oscar in qualifying 21-3 in the Grand Prix. So if it is going to be down to Lando and Oscar for a championship battle next year, I feel like you have to put your money on Lando. I did honestly expect Oscar to be a bit closer to Lando at this point. I watched Oscar's junior career and he was fantastic the whole way through, but he does seem quite off the pace of Lando at the moment, particularly in the qualifying. That 21-3 was very dominant from Lando. The only more dominant teammate pairing we saw was Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, where Max Verstappen won 23-1 in qualifying. Speaking of Red Bull, despite having won the Drivers' Championship last year, Red Bull Racing finished down in P3, almost 100 points behind McLaren and Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship, with Max Verstappen once again proving that we are witnessing one of the greats of our sports in the making. But with Red Bull losing so many key personnel over the last few years and seemingly dropping off massively in competitiveness towards the end of last year, you've got to wonder if even Max Verstappen will be able to outdrive the car enough to fight for wins and maybe even that 5th world title. And I honestly just don't see how they're going to do it. I mean, Red Bull have said in the media recently that they're just as confident as they ever are going into this year. But in the last 2 years, they've lost Dan Fallows, Rob Marshall, Will Courtney, Jonathan Wheatley, and the biggest hit of all, Adrian Newey. So it's hard to see how they can be so confident going into this year. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see if Red Bull are towards the upper end of the midfield next year. Adjusting to not having Adrian Newey at the team for the first time in 18 years is bound to come with some teething issues. And all the other top teams are seemingly making massive steps forward, whereas Red Bull really can't seem to understand what's going on with their car. I mean, towards the end of last year, they often looked like the 4th fastest car going into each race weekend. Max was obviously still able to drive that car to a victory at Brazil, but that was far more down to individual skill than the car being set up well that day. That being said, they're probably going to rock up to pre-season testing in a few weeks and blow everyone away by 2 seconds a lap. Another new element to Red Bull Racing is their new driver in Liam Lawson. Now, Max's teammates in recent years haven't really challenged him in the way that I think Liam could. I've said it before, Liam Lawson wins in every category he has ever raced in, and I don't think it's going to be any different in Formula 1 if Red Bull have got a competitive enough car. Now, do I think that Liam Lawson's going to take the fight to Max Verstappen and even beat him across the course of a season? Definitely not. But I do think that he's going to be a lot closer than recent teammates have been to Max, particularly Sergio Perez, who seemed to be miles off the pace over the last few years. But that being said, Liam is still basically a rookie, so maybe in a few years we could see him on a similar level to Max Verstappen. Maybe, maybe not. But speaking of rookies, with 6 rookie drivers joining the grid next year, it's going to be super exciting to see how they all get on, particularly when you've got some rated a lot higher than others. Jack Doohan, for example, already has his seat called into question with Alpine's recent signing of Franco Colapinto as their reserve driver, meaning that Jack Doohan is going to have to be quick straight out of the blocks if he does hope to keep that seat. But I did outline everything in a video there. And then you've got Isaac Hadjar joining Yuki Tsunoda at the Red Bull Racing Visa Cash App team, whatever they call it. But Hadjar hasn't taken any championship victories in cars or in go-karts, which is very, very rare for a Formula 1 driver. If you look at Oscar Piastri, for example, he won back-to-back rookie championships in Formula 4, Formula 3 and Formula 2 and still had to wait a year to join the grid for 2023, I think he joined. So if Isaac isn't on the pace of Yuki Tsunoda next year, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see rumours circulate about Hadjar's future. One of the young drivers I am most excited to see is Kimi Antonelli. I did a video about him the other day on a few records in Formula 1 that I think he could beat, so if you haven't already, go and check that out. But having such a young driver joining a potentially race-winning team is something we've not seen since back in 2007 when Lewis Hamilton joined McLaren. Do I think that Kimi Antonelli is going to have a similar season to Lewis Hamilton? Probably not. I mean, Lewis's rookie season is arguably the best that we have ever seen in Formula 1, so it's going to be pretty tough for anyone to beat that year. But we could maybe see him take a few podiums, maybe a pole position, or maybe even a win. Another highly rated youngster is Sauber's Gabriel Bortoleto, who has just come off winning back-to-back Formula 3 and Formula 2 titles as a rookie. Unfortunately, he will be in a car next year that is likely to be one of the slowest on the grid, and he does have a very experienced teammate in Nico Hülkenberg. So if Bortoleto does want to prove himself, he's going to have to do it at the back of the grid, like recent Formula 2 champions in George Russell when he was at Williams and Charles Leclerc when he was with Sauber. Like Bortoleto, you've got Ollie Behrman, who's joining Haas, a team that again we do expect to be towards the back end of the grid. Oh, fly. I am a huge Ollie Behrman fan. I started watching him in Formula 3. I thought he was wicked. His Formula 2 campaign wasn't fantastic, but the Prema was a bit of a dog the last few years. But what I'm most excited to see is the teammate battle between Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon. Ocon does have a history of not really getting on well with his teammates. We saw that with Sergio Perez at Racing Point and Pierre Gasly at Alpine and Fernando Alonso at Alpine. And of course, Ollie Behrman is going to want to prove himself to Ferrari that he is the next driver in line if Lewis Hamilton does decide to retire in a few years. And of course, Ocon's not going to want to be beaten by a young driver, so I think there is some potential for some fireworks down at Haas. It's going to be really interesting to see how Ayu Komatsu deals with teammate drama, because when Gunther Steiner was in charge and there was drama between K-Mag and Grosjean, Gunther's management style was less than optimal, we'll say. As a big fan of the feeder series, I'm going to be following all of these young drivers very closely, and I do intend on putting out a rookie report mid-season and at the end of the year outlining how each of the rookies has got on. There's a few other things I want to run through really quickly as well. Before we have even had the first lights out of the year, there's already controversy surrounding the FIA. The FIA want to send out much harsher penalties for anything that conflicts with the FIA's neutrality position. Last year, the drivers did get together as the GDPA and send a message to particularly Mohammed Ben Sulayem at the FIA, saying that they weren't too happy with the way they're being spoken to and that they're not children and they don't need to be looked after like children. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more sarcasm from Max in the media pen and maybe from other drivers too. This is the last year that this generation of car will be used, and as well the last year that we will see DRS in Formula 1. As is very typical for Formula 1, as soon as the grid starts getting really close and we don't know who's going to win every weekend, they decide to shake things up with new regulations, meaning that we will likely get another dominant team coming for 2026. It's also going to be really exciting to see how Aston Martin get on with the recent addition of Adrian Newey. Obviously, Adrian Newey wasn't able to have any impact on this year's car because he can't start working for them until March of this year. But if Adrian does come up with any creative ways to improve the Aston Martin car next year, I'm sure that Lawrence Stroll will be reaching into his very deep pockets to get the upgrades on the car as soon as possible. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything I missed off this list, or indeed what you're most excited to see for next year. For me personally, it's Lewis at Ferrari going for that 8th title. If Lewis is able to achieve that 8th title with Ferrari, it would be such a fairy tale ending to what has been one of the most decorated careers we have ever seen. If you are new here, please do consider subscribing to the channel. We recently reached 1,000 subscribers, which is a milestone that I never thought would even be possible. So thank you so much to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.